I reached the workshop before sunrise and found my daughter standing beside the locked drawer under my drafting table. Claire had the blue-tied ledger in both hands. That book had stayed in the workshop for 36 years. Every cabinet order, every deposit, every lumber code, and every unpaid balance had passed through its pages. My wife June had started the system when we could not afford a proper office. I kept it because it still worked. Claire said the records were being moved into the front office. I told her the ledger belonged beside the work orders. She looked toward the glass office where her husband Derek sat behind a new computer screen. Then she said I was no longer responsible for the financial side of Mercer Woodworks. Nobody had told me that before. I followed her across the shop. The morning crew had not arrived yet, and the only sound came from the dust collector cooling along the back wall. On Derek's desk sat a stack of copied ledger pages. I recognized the order numbers at once. They belonged to kitchen projects in Springfield, Bellefontaine, and 2 farmhouses outside town. Each one still had a large balance due. The smaller repair jobs had not been copied. Neither had the jobs already paid in full. I lifted the top page and saw yellow marks beside the unpaid amounts. Claire took it from my hand and said the bank needed clean records before reviewing our credit line. Derek stayed seated. He said the old system was holding the company back, and from that morning forward all customer files would remain in his office. I asked who had authorized the change. Claire answered without looking at me. She said the family had already discussed it. There were only 3 people in that family meeting, and one of them was standing there for the first time. At the bottom of the copied pages was a printed label, Mercer Home Interiors. The name looked close enough to mine that a customer might not notice the difference. I had never heard of the company. I carried the top copied page back to my drafting table before Claire could stop me. The yellow marks beside the unpaid balances were not random. They followed the largest remaining payments, not the biggest jobs. A farmhouse kitchen near Bellefontaine had already paid for cabinets and hardware, but still owed for installation. A library wall in Springfield had a final payment due after delivery. 2 smaller repair jobs had larger profit margins, yet neither one had been marked because the customers had paid in advance. Someone had selected money that was still moving. Claire came after me and placed the blue-tied ledger against her chest. She said the pages were part of a digital review. She said Derek needed to know which customers might delay payment before the bank examined our credit line. I asked to see the message from the bank. She told me Derek had handled it. I walked past her and went to the small desk near the finishing room. That computer was older than the machines in the office, but I had used it for invoices, purchase orders, and payroll approval for years. My password failed. I entered it again. The screen said my account had been disabled by an administrator. Claire stood in the doorway. She said the software company had recommended limiting access during the conversion. I told her a conversion did not require locking out the owner. She looked tired instead of embarrassed. That troubled me more than anger would have. Claire had spent 15 years managing our office. She knew which bills had to be paid before Friday, which contractors needed reminders, and which customers expected a paper copy in the mail. She had earned authority there. I had never treated her like a temporary helper. Still, she had changed my access without asking. Derek joined us carrying a white coffee cup that had the Mercer name printed on one side. He said nothing had been taken from me. He said they were creating a safer system and would give me whatever reports I needed. I told him I did not need reports from my own company. I needed access. He said the company could not grow while every decision waited for me. Claire told him to let her handle it. That was the first clear difference between them. Derek wanted the conversation to become a question of control. Claire wanted it to sound like care. She placed one hand on my arm and said I had done enough. She reminded me that the winter had been hard on my back and that I had missed 2 mornings after slipping near the loading door. I had missed 2 mornings in 36 years. She said the bank wanted records kept in one place, under one administrator, with no duplicate files. I looked at the ledger in her hands. It was not a duplicate. It was the original record of every active order. The front bell rang before I could answer. A man named Harold Benson stepped inside carrying a folded sheet of paper. His family had hired us 3 times. I had built a maple kitchen for his parents, a walnut desk for his law office, and now a set of cabinets for the house his daughter had bought outside Springfield. Harold said he was glad to find me there. He opened the paper on the nearest workbench and asked whether our bank had changed. The page carried our logo at the top, though the blue was a shade darker than the one we used. The message thanked him for choosing Mercer Craftsmanship and instructed him to send the remaining balance to a new account. The receiving business was Mercer Home Interiors. I asked when he had received it. He said the previous afternoon. The message had come from an address using the Mercer name, followed by the word Interiors. At the bottom it listed Claire as account manager. Claire took the paper and said the new account was part of the office conversion. I asked whether Harold had already sent the money. He said no. His daughter had noticed that the business name did not match the name on the contract. Derek stepped closer and said Mercer. Home Interiors was an affiliated company, created to handle design and billing. He said the work still belonged to us. I told him I had never approved an affiliated company. He answered that Claire had authority over office operations. Claire said the change was temporary. She said they had planned to explain everything after the bank meeting. Harold watched the three of us without speaking. In a town our size, people did not need a public argument to understand that a family was divided. I folded the paper and asked Harold to hold his payment until he received instructions directly from me. Derek said that would damage our cash flow. I told him money sent under a contract with Mercer Woodworks belonged to Mercer Woodworks. His face changed then. Not much, but enough. He stopped speaking about safety and growth. He asked Harold to leave the paper with Claire. Harold handed it to me instead. After he left, Claire said I had embarrassed her in front of a customer. I asked how many customers had received the same message. She said she did not know the exact number. Derek said 12. Claire turned toward him. He corrected himself and said perhaps 12. I returned to the copied ledger pages. There were 12 yellow marks. The question of why the ledger had been moved was no longer difficult. Someone needed the unpaid balances, the contact names, and the timing of final payment. The scans gave them all three without requiring access to the workshop again. I took the customer notice to my truck and called Naomi Kerr from the parking lot. Naomi had handled our taxes and financial records since June, still ran payroll from a green metal box. I told her my access had been disabled and read the new account instructions aloud. She asked whether I had signed a banking resolution. I had not. She asked whether I had approved a new company. I had not. Naomi told me not to accuse anyone yet. She said she would pull the accounting records, verify the legal owner of every open invoice, and meet me before noon. Then she told me to call the bank myself. The lending officer knew my voice. He listened while I explained that Claire had said the bank required centralized records for a credit review. He checked our file. There was no scheduled review. There was no request to move our records. There was no instruction to change customer payment accounts. The bank had never asked Claire or Derek to do any of it. Owen Pike found me behind the finishing room, with the customer notice folded in my shirt pocket. He had worked beside me long enough to recognize when I was measuring more than wood. He did not ask what Claire had said. He only told me there was something in the walnut rack I needed to see before the rest of the crew arrived. We crossed the workshop to the storage bay along the north wall. Each active order had a separate space there. Lumber was stacked by species and thickness, then marked with a brass tag stamped with the order number. June had started using those tags after a supplier mixed 2 cherry orders during our 3rd year in business. Owen stopped beside the lumber for the Benson kitchen. One brass tag hung from the front board. Another rested behind it. Both carried the same order number. The first said Mercer Woodworks. The second said Mercer Home Interiors. I held the 2 tags together. The stamped numbers matched. The second tag was newer, with sharper edges and no dark marks from workshop dust. I asked Owen where he had found it. He said it had been tied beneath the original tag where a person walking past would not see it. He had noticed the extra wire while checking moisture levels the evening before. He showed me the lumber for the Springfield Library wall. That stack also had 2 tags. So did a white oak kitchen for a farmhouse west of town. There were 7 duplicate tags in the storage bay. Everyone matched an order marked in yellow on the copied ledger pages. None of the small repair jobs had duplicates. None of the low-profit jobs had them. Owen said Derek had brought the new tags into the workshop about 3 weeks earlier. He told the crew they were part of a better tracking system. When one of the younger men asked why the company name was different, Derek said the office was separating design work from production. I asked whether Claire had been present. Owen nodded. She had stood near the loading door with a clipboard. She told the crew the change would make billing easier and asked them not to trouble me with details while I was recovering from my fall. I had not been recovering. I had returned after 2 mornings and worked a full day. Owen rubbed the edge of one brass tag with his thumb. He said that was why he had waited before showing me. Claire had spoken as though I had approved everything. She knew the office better than anyone. Most of the crew believed her. I asked what changed his mind. He looked toward the front office. 2 days earlier, Derek had told him to remove the Mercer Woodworks tags after each job was delivered. Owen had asked whether he should keep them for our record. Derek said the old tags would no longer matter once the customer paid the new company. That was not tracking, it was replacement. The duplicate tags connected the lumber, the labor, and the customer orders to a company I did not own. They also showed that the plan had reached beyond paper notices. Derek was preparing the workshop to look as though the profitable jobs had always belonged somewhere else. The crew began arriving while we stood in the storage bay. Owen placed the duplicate tags in a small parts tray and covered them with a clean shop towel. He said he had not told anyone else. I told him to keep it that way until Naomi arrived. He asked whether his job was in danger. I said every job in the building was in danger if customers paid one company while another company bought the lumber and paid the wages. He understood that without further explanation. Owen had survived slow winters, a fire in the sanding room, and the year a contractor left us with 6 unpaid kitchens. He knew a workshop did not fail only when orders stopped. It could fail while everyone stayed busy if the money moved somewhere else. Claire entered through the loading door carrying the blue-tied ledger. She placed it on the office desk, but did not return it to the locked drawer. Derek followed her with a box of new folders. I carried one duplicate tag into the office and set it between them. Claire looked at the company name and then at Derek. Derek said the tags belonged to a pilot program. I asked why the pilot included only jobs with large balances and strong profit margins. He said those jobs were the best examples for testing a new system. I asked why customers had been told to pay the new company. Claire said Mercer Home Interiors would handle design contracts and customer billing, while Mercer Woodworks focused on production. I asked who owned Mercer Home Interiors. Derek answered that he and Claire had formed it together. That was the first time either of them admitted the company belonged to them. Claire said they had planned to offer me a place in it after the bank approved their expansion loan. She described showrooms, builder contracts, and a sales territory that stretched from Dayton to Columbus. She said Mercer Woodworks had stayed too small because I turned down projects whenever the schedule became crowded. That part refused work that would force us to rush joinery, hire crews we could not train, or borrow against machines that were already paid for. Claire had watched other cabinet companies grow faster. She had also watched 2 of them close after a bad year. She said caution had become fear. I told her caution had paid every employee through 3 recessions. Derek said history would not protect us from larger competitors. He said the new company could bring in contracts my workshop would never reach on its own. I asked why he had hidden it. He said he had not hidden anything. He had simply waited until the structure was ready, stood outside the office door. Derek noticed him and told him to return to work. Owen did not move. He said the duplicate tags had been hidden beneath the original ones. Derek said that was a production mistake. Owen said all 7 mistakes happened on the most profitable open orders. Claire turned toward Owen and reminded him that she had approved every bonus he had received for the past 10 years. Her voice stayed calm, but the meaning was clear. She wanted loyalty measured as a debt. Owen said June had taught him that an order number followed the customer payment from the first deposit to the final receipt. He said changing the company name without changing the labor, materials, or contract did not create a new order. Claire told him he was not an accountant. He answered that he knew which company had bought the walnut. Derek stepped around the desk and picked up the brass tag. He said, employees did not decide business structure. I took the tag back from him. I told him neither did a son-in-law who had never bought a share of Mercer Woodworks. Claire said the company needed a future. She said she had spent years in the office while Owen and the other men received praise for building what she sold and collected. Her resentment was not about money alone. She believed the workshop respected visible work more than hers. Derek had given that belief a plan. Owen looked at me, then at Claire. He said the crew had never believed her work mattered less. Claire did not answer him. Derek told us the discussion was over. He said an equipment specialist would visit the following afternoon to assess production capacity for the expansion. I asked which equipment specialist. He said the appointment concerned insurance values and loan planning. Owen waited until Claire and Derek left the office. Then he told me Derek had not called the man an insurance specialist when they spoke near the loading dock. He had called him an appraiser. The appointment included the wide belt sander, the computer-controlled router, and the large sliding saw. Those were the three machines the workshop could not operate without. The appraiser arrived before noon in a gray pickup with a magnetic company sign on the door. Derek met him in the parking lot and walked him toward the loading bay without bringing him through the front office. Claire followed with a folder under one arm. Neither of them looked toward my drafting table. I let them reach the computer-controlled router before I joined them. The appraiser introduced himself as Martin Voss. He said he had been hired to document equipment for a financing package. I asked which company had hired him. He looked at Derek. Derek said Mercer Home Interiors was arranging the loan, but the machines would support both companies. I told Martin the machines belonged to Mercer Woodworks and were not available as collateral for another business. Claire opened the folder and said that was the reason we needed a formal meeting. She asked Martin to wait in the office while the family reviewed the transfer plan. The word transfer settled the matter more clearly than any speech about growth. Inside the office, Derek placed 3 documents on the table. The first was called a retirement agreement. The second assigned use of the Mercer name and customer list to Mercer Home Interiors. The third listed the major machines as production assets available to the new company. My name appeared at the bottom of every page. There was no signature, but the typed line made it look as though approval was expected rather than requested. Claire pulled out a chair for me. She said the agreement would protect my income. I would receive a monthly payment, keep my health coverage through the business, and retain a consulting title. Derek would handle expansion. She would oversee customer accounts. The workshop crew would continue producing cabinets under service contracts from the new company. I read the payment amount twice. It was less than the profit from one good kitchen each month. I asked who had calculated the value of the business. Derek said they were not purchasing the whole business at once. They were separating the parts that needed investment. The customer list, the Mercer name, the active contracts, and the machines were the parts that produced money. What remained would be a workshop with wages, utility bills, and no direct claim to customer payments. I told him that was not separation. It was removal. Claire said I was focusing on the language instead of the opportunity. I turned to the equipment schedule. The wide belt sander, the sliding saw, and the computer-controlled router were listed with serial numbers, purchase years, and estimated values. 2 smaller machines were included as well. The list was detailed enough for someone to arrange transportation or financing. I asked where the serial numbers came from. Derek said Martin had recorded them during an earlier visit. Martin was still seated near the front window. He heard his name and stepped closer. He said he had never entered the workshop before that morning. The serial numbers had been provided in advance. Claire looked at Derek. He said Owen must have supplied them. I knew that was false. Owen did not keep purchase files, and the serial plates on 2 machines were behind locked service panels. I had photographed those plates the previous winter when our insurer requested updated records. The photographs were stored in the office computer under my account, the same account Claire had disabled. I asked her whether she had opened the insurance folder. She said office records were part of her responsibility. I told her responsibility did not include giving my property information to another company. Her voice tightened. She said the machines had been bought for the family business, and Mercer Home Interiors was a family business. I said ownership did not change because she used the same family name. Derek pushed the retirement agreement toward me. He said the expansion lender needed a clear structure before the end of the week. He said delay could cost them a large builder contract. I asked to see the builder contract. He said it was confidential until financing was approved. I asked to see the loan application. He said Naomi had the financial documents. That was another lie. Naomi had told me she knew nothing about the new company until my call that morning. Claire placed a pen beside the signature line. She said we could adjust details later, but the lender needed evidence that I supported the transition. I closed the folder. I told them I would not sign anything that day. I wanted complete copies of every document, the name of the lender, the proposed loan amount, the builder contract, and the ownership records for Mercer Home Interiors. Derek said the deadline did not allow for that. I said then the deadline would pass. Claire stood from the table. She said I was proving why they had acted before speaking to me. Every change became a personal insult. Every new idea became a threat. I told her the threat was a paper that placed machines I owned under the control of a company I did not own. She said the machines would remain in the same building. Martin cleared his throat. He said the work order he received included transport estimates. The room went still. I asked him what equipment was scheduled for transport. He checked his tablet. The wide belt sander and the computer-controlled router were listed for pickup the next morning. The destination was a warehouse outside Springfield. Claire said there had been a misunderstanding. Martin turned the screen toward us. The request included the machine serial numbers, loading instructions, and the name of a trucking company. Derek said the warehouse was temporary storage, while electrical upgrades were completed in our shop. No electrical work had been scheduled. I asked Martin who submitted the request. He said the account belonged to Mercer Home Interiors, and the contact name was Derek Hale. I told Martin the appraisal was finished. He could photograph nothing else and could not authorize any equipment movement. He nodded and returned to his truck. Derek waited until the door closed behind him. Then he said I had damaged their financing position in front of a vendor. I told him he had invited a vendor to inventory property he did not own. Claire stepped between us. She said the machines were supposed to support a larger operation. She said no one was stealing them. I asked why they were scheduled to leave before I signed the agreement. She looked at the papers instead of me. That answer was enough. I gathered every document from the table. Derek reached for the equipment schedule, but I held it against my chest. He said those were company files. I told him they had my name and my machines on them. Claire said I could have copies, but the originals had to remain in the office. I carried the folder to the copier near the payroll cabinet. While the pages ran, I called Naomi and told her about the scheduled pickup. She told me to photograph the machine plates again, save the files outside the office system, and contact the trucking company before anyone changed the schedule. Owen helped me open the service panels. We photographed each serial plate beside that morning newspaper and the original purchase invoice. He also photographed the machines in place, connected to our dust system, and surrounded by current Mercer Woodworks jobs. The trucking dispatcher answered on the second call. She confirmed a pickup scheduled for the next morning. 2 machines were listed. Payment had already been arranged by Mercer Home Interiors. I told her the equipment owner had not authorized removal. She asked for proof in writing. Naomi prepared a notice while I was still on the phone. I sent the purchase invoices, insurance records, serial photographs, and a statement that the machines could not leave the property without my written approval. The dispatcher placed the pickup on hold. That protected the machines for 1 day. It did not explain how far Claire and Derek had already gone. After lunch, I examined the transfer documents again. The retirement agreement contained a schedule of assets. The customer list contained every open order marked in yellow. The equipment page matched the serial numbers from my insurance folder. At the bottom of the asset schedule was a certification stating that the information had been reviewed by the owner of Mercer Woodworks. Below that sentence, my name had been typed. Beside it was a small set of initials. They were not mine. They were Claire initials. Naomi arrived carrying 2 canvas bags and a portable scanner. She did not sit in the front office. We used the finishing table beside the north windows where Claire and Derek could see us without hearing every word. Naomi placed the customer notice beside the copied ledger pages then opened the accounting record she had pulled from the secure backup. She asked for the blue-tied ledger. Claire said it was being scanned. Naomi told her the original record was required for comparison. Derek came out of the office and said Naomi worked for Mercer Woodworks, not for Walter personally. He said any review had to be approved by management. Naomi looked at me. I told her I was still the owner and president. She opened her bag and removed the annual ownership report, the business registration, and the banking authorization form. My name appeared alone where control was listed. Claire had authority to process payments and payroll. She did not have authority to transfer contracts, assign equipment, open an affiliated company under our name, or redirect money owed to Mercer Woodworks. Naomi asked for the ledger again. Claire brought it to the table. The blue cloth strip had been reedied in a different knot. June had always looped it twice and tucked the loose end beneath the cover. Claire had wrapped it once and left the end hanging. I opened the book to the Benson order. A faint pencil mark appeared beside the unpaid balance. There was another beside the Springfield Library wall, another beside the farmhouse kitchen, and more on every order that had received a duplicate brass tag. The marks were small enough to miss during ordinary work. They were also fresh. The graphite had not yet darkened under workshop dust or the oil from my hands. Naomi matched those entries to the printed scans from Derek's desk. The pages had been copied in the same order as the pencil marks. She asked Claire who had marked the ledger. Claire said Derek had probably done it while reviewing cash flow. Derek said the marks came from an earlier billing check. I knew both answers could not be true. Naomi did not argue. She wrote down each explanation on a yellow legal pad and asked when Mercer Home Interiors had been formed. Claire said about 6 weeks earlier. Derek said the filing had taken longer than expected, so the exact date might be earlier. Naomi turned her laptop toward us. Mercer Home Interiors had been registered 4 months before that morning. The address belonged to a small warehouse outside Springfield. The same address appeared on the transport request for my machines. The filing listed Claire and Derek as equal members. Claire stared at the date. She said they had registered the name before deciding whether to use it. Naomi asked why the company had opened a bank account 2 days later. Derek said an account was necessary for startup expenses. Naomi asked where the startup money came from. He said personal savings. She placed a printed transaction record on the table. The first deposit had come from Claire's personal account. The amount was modest. The second deposit arrived 6 weeks later and was much larger. It matched a payment from a Mercer Woodworks customer. The customer was a contractor named Paul Vetter. We had built reception counters and office cabinets for a medical practice near Dayton. His final payment had never appeared in our operating account. Claire had told me the contractor was late. Derek had sent 2 collection messages while standing in my office. The customer had not been late. He had paid on the date required by the contract. He had sent the money to Mercer Home Interiors after receiving new instruction. Naomi opened the electronic record from our accounting system. The invoice still showed an unpaid balance because no one had entered the payment. Our books made it look as though the customer owed us money. The new company held the payment. Mercer Woodworks had purchased the lumber, paid the crew, covered delivery, and carried the cost for more than 3 months. I asked where the money went after it reached the new account. Naomi said part of it paid the warehouse deposit. Another part paid for a design software license. The largest transfer went to a lending company connected to a property on Maple Ridge Road. Derek stepped closer to the table. He said that transfer was a temporary loan between related businesses. Naomi asked what business operated on Maple Ridge Road. He said the property was an investment. Claire said nothing. I knew the road. 2 new houses stood there behind unfinished lawns and plastic construction fencing. Derek had bought both with a partner the previous year. He expected to sell them before winter. One sale had collapsed after an inspection. The other house had remained empty. I asked whether the payment from Paul Vetter had covered a loan on one of those houses. Derek said his personal finances had nothing to do with the workshop. Naomi tapped the transaction record. She said they became connected when money owed to Mercer Woodworks entered his company and paid his lender. He called it an accounting error. She asked why the same amount had been entered into Mercer Home Interiors records as design revenue. He said the bookkeeper must have classified it incorrectly. Claire finally spoke. She said there was no bookkeeper. Derek had entered the transaction himself. He turned toward her. She told him not to pretend someone else had done it. The difference between them widened in front of us. Claire still wanted to protect the plan by calling it a transition. Derek wanted to protect himself by calling each piece a mistake. Naomi asked whether there were other customer payments in the new account. Derek said there had been a few test transactions. She asked how many. He did not answer. Claire said 3. Naomi had already found 5. 2 belonged to completed jobs. 3 belonged to active orders, still in our storage bay. Together they represented enough money to cover nearly 2 months of wages and supplier bills. The new company had paid none of those expenses. Naomi explained the pattern in plain terms. Mercer Woodworks accepted the contracts, bought the materials, paid the workers, and completed the labor. Mercer Home Interiors collected selected balances. The profitable money moved out while the costs stayed behind. That was why only certain ledger pages had been scanned. They had not been choosing jobs for expansion. They had been choosing receivables. I looked through the glass wall into the office. The Blue Company cups, new printer, and design brochures had seemed like signs of an ambitious son-in-law. Now they looked like tools bought with money that should have covered payroll. I asked Claire when she learned about the payment from Paul Vetter. She said Derek handled the account. I asked when she learned his property loan was behind. She looked at him before answering. She said she knew the houses had become expensive. Derek said every investment carried risk. He said the workshop needed growth and the warehouse gave them room to build a showroom. He said once the builder contract started, every transferred dollar would return with profit. Naomi asked to see the builder contract. He said it was not final. The loan depended on the contract. The contract depended on the loan. The machines were scheduled to move before either one existed. I asked Claire whether she had expected me to sign the retirement agreement after the money had already been taken. She said she expected me to understand once I saw the full plan. I told her a full plan did not begin by disabling my account. Her eyes moved to the ledger. She said I never would have agreed if they had asked first. That was the first honest sentence she had given me. Naomi requested the office computer backup. Claire gave her the administrator password after a long pause. Derek objected, but Claire said the records would be examined sooner or later. We copied the customer notices, invoice exports, company formation files, equipment schedules, and messages sent from the new email address. Naomi created 2 encrypted copies. I kept one. She took the other. Then she searched for the earliest message containing the new payment instructions. The first one had been drafted 3 months earlier. It concerned the Paul Vetter invoice. Derek had written the message, but he had not sent it alone. At the bottom of the approval record was a second user. Claire had opened the draft, changed the receiving account number, and marked the notice ready for delivery. Beside the approval line were her initials. The date was 6 weeks before she first mentioned retirement to me. Claire arrived at my house before 7 the next morning. She stood on the porch with a paper cup in each hand and the expression she used when she wanted a difficult conversation to look ordinary. She said she had brought coffee and asked whether we could settle things before the crew arrived. I let her inside. She placed the cups on the kitchen table but did not sit. She said Derek had made mistakes. She said the payment from Paul Vetter should never have been used for the property loan. She said they would return the money once the expansion financing closed. I asked about the other 4 customer payments. She said those funds were still part of the business plan. I told her they belonged to Mercer Woodworks. Claire said the 2 companies were supposed to become one operation after I signed the retirement agreement. She said they had moved too quickly because Derek was afraid the warehouse lease and builder opportunity would disappear. I asked why my name had been typed beneath a statement that I had reviewed the assets. She said the document was only a draft. I placed the copy on the table and pointed to her initials. She looked at them for several seconds. Then she said Derek needed proof that someone from the Mercer family had approved the information. I told her that someone had not been the owner. She said I was treating her like an outsider after she had spent half her adult life inside the office. I reminded her that she had approved false payment instructions, hidden a company, disabled my access, and prepared my machines for removal. She said everything had been done to keep the Mercer name alive. I asked whether a name stayed alive after the business carrying it could no longer pay wages. Claire picked up one of the cups and held it without drinking. She said the workshop would have received production contracts from Mercer Home Interiors. The new company would control design, sales, and customer payments. My company would build the cabinets for a fixed fee. I asked who had set that fee. Derek had. I asked whether it covered wages, lumber, insurance, utilities, delivery, machine repair, and the lease value of the building. She said the numbers were still being adjusted. The answer told me what the documents had not. They were not buying the workshop. They were turning it into a supplier that carried every risk while their company controlled every customer and every dollar. I asked what would happen if Mercer Woodworks could not survive on the fee. Claire said I would no longer have to worry about those details. She meant the workshop could fail after the name and customers had moved. I asked her whether she understood that. Her face changed. She looked down at the table and said Derek believed the workshop could be absorbed later. There it was. The plan had not been temporary. Mercer Woodworks was supposed to become weak enough that selling it to their company would look necessary. I asked how they intended to pay for it. Claire said the new company would make a purchase offer after the builder contract began. I asked where the down payment would come from. She did not answer. I opened the copied account records Naomi had given me. The 5 redirected customer payments were marked beside the projected purchase amount from the retirement agreement. Together, they came close to the proposed down payment. Claire had intended to use money earned by my company to buy control of my company. She said it was not that simple. I told her it was exactly that simple. She set the coffee down. Her voice remained quiet, but the care had left it. She said I had never created a real succession plan. I praised Owen for solving production problems. I trusted Naomi with financial questions. I still approved large purchases and spoke to major customers myself. Claire said she had spent years holding the office together while everyone treated her as the daughter who answered phones. I told her she managed far more than phones, and she knew I believed that. She said belief without authority meant nothing. I asked whether that was why she had taken authority before it was given. She said she had waited long enough. The anger in her voice was old. Derek had not created it. He had found it and given it a schedule, a bank account, and a company name. I told her I had once planned to place her in charge of administration and customer development while Owen led production. The arrangement would have given both of them real authority, with Naomi keeping financial reporting separate from daily operations. Claire stared at me. She asked why I had never told her. I said I had been waiting until the new accounting system was stable and until she showed she could disagree with me without turning every disagreement into proof that I did not value her. She laughed once, without humor. She said Owen would still have received equal power. I told her equal responsibility was not an insult. She said it was my company, so I had the right to decide. Then she looked at the records and added that she had the right to protect her future. I told her she had protected it with money that was not hers. She left the coffee on the table and walked out. When I reached the workshop, the side entrance would not open. My key turned in the lock, but the alarm panel rejected my code. Owen opened the loading door from inside. He said Claire had arrived shortly before dawn with an alarm technician. She told him the system was being updated after a security review. The office computers were locked. The payroll cabinet had a new key cylinder. A printed notice had been taped beside the time clock. The notice said I was taking an immediate health leave. It instructed employees to direct all business questions to Claire and Derek. My name appeared at the bottom, typed in the same plain font used on the transfer documents. The crew stood near the benches reading it. I removed the notice and placed it on my drafting table. Claire entered from the front office. Derek followed her. She said the leave was temporary. She said the conflict was affecting my judgment and the business needed calm leadership while the records were reviewed. I asked which doctor had recommended leave. She said no doctor was involved. Derek said the company had a duty to protect employees from unstable decisions. Owen stepped away from the crew and asked which decision had been unstable. Derek said stopping customer payments and equipment financing could force layoffs. I told the crew that Mercer Woodworks had completed the work connected to 5 payments that had been sent to another company. I told them 2 machines had been scheduled for removal without my approval. I told them Naomi was confirming the records and that no employee had caused the problem. Claire said I was discussing private family matters in front of workers. I said wages were not private when someone had moved the money meant to pay them. Derek told the crew to return to work. Nobody moved. I took out my phone and called the alarm company. I identified myself, gave the account number from an old service invoice, and asked who had authorized the code change. The technician had accepted Claire approval because she was listed as an administrative contact. I told the company she was no longer authorized to change access. I sent the ownership report and requested a new master code under my name only. Then I called the bank. Naomi had already submitted the redirected payment records. The bank placed a hold on outgoing transfers from the Mercer Woodworks accounts and flagged incoming customer funds connected to the disputed instructions. I removed Claire from payment approval. I removed Derek from every vendor and customer account where he had been added. I called our email provider and restored my administrator access. I instructed the crew to finish only the jobs already in production. We would accept no new orders until every contract and payment route had been verified. Claire stood beside the office door with both hands closed around her keys. She said I was destroying the company to prove a point. I told her I was stopping the company from being emptied. Derek said I could not run the office without them. I told him Naomi would supervise the records. Owen would control production access. I would contact every affected customer myself. Claire asked what would happen to her. I told her she was suspended from all business duties until the financial review was complete. She said I could not suspend my own daughter. I told her I was not suspending my daughter. I was removing an officer who had redirected customer money and prepared assets for transfer. For the first time, she had no language that could turn the action into care. A diesel engine sounded outside. The trucking company had removed the hold from the schedule after receiving a second authorization that morning. A flatbed truck turned into the yard and stopped beside the loading bay. The driver climbed down with a clipboard. At the top of his pickup sheet were the serial numbers of my router and wide belt sander. The driver handed me the pickup sheet while the engine idled beside the loading bay. The serial numbers matched my router and wide belt sander. The authorization line carried Derek's name and a morning timestamp. Beneath it was a note stating that the equipment owner had approved removal after a scheduling dispute had been resolved. I told the driver no approval had come from me. He looked toward Derek, who had followed us into the yard. Derek said the machines were business assets and the transfer had already been arranged. He told the driver that I was confused about the new company structure. The driver did not move. He asked to see proof of ownership. I handed him the purchase invoices, the insurance schedule, and the photographs Naomi had told me to take. Every document listed Mercer Woodworks. My name appeared as the authorized owner. The warehouse address did not appear anywhere. Derek said those records were outdated. I asked him to show a bill of sale. He had none. I asked him to show a signed lease for the machines. He had none. I asked him to show the retirement agreement with my signature. He said the family transition had already been approved in principle. The driver said principle was not enough for his company. He called his dispatcher from the cab. I stood beside the open door and listened while he read the serial numbers aloud. The dispatcher confirmed she had received my written objection the previous afternoon. She also confirmed that a second email had arrived that morning claiming I had withdrawn it. That message had come from the Mercer Home Interiors account. It included a typed statement under my name. I had never seen it. The dispatcher told the driver to leave the machines in place until the ownership dispute was resolved in writing. He removed the loading chains from the flatbed and returned the pickup sheet to me. Derek said the trucking company would be responsible for the loss of the financing agreement. The driver said his company was responsible for moving property only when the customer had authority to release it. Then he climbed back into the cab and drove out of the yard. The crew watched the truck disappear past the old rail crossing. Nobody celebrated. They understood that stopping the truck did not restore the missing aliens or repair the customer accounts. It only kept the workshop alive long enough for us to act. Naomi arrived 20 minutes later with a bank representative on speakerphone. The bank had completed its first review of the 5 redirected payments. 3 remained in the Mercer Home Interiors account. 1 had paid the warehouse deposit. The payment from Paul Vetter had been divided between the property lender and several smaller expenses. The bank could hold the remaining funds while the account ownership and customer instructions were examined. It could not simply move the money back because the receiving account belonged to a separate company. Naomi said each customer would need to confirm that the payment had been intended for a Mercer Woodworks contract. I called Harold Benson first. He had not sent his payment, but he agreed to provide the notice he received and confirmed that his contract named Mercer Woodworks. Paul Vetter answered after the second call. He was angry when he learned his payment had never reached our account. He said the new instructions had carried Claire's name and the same order number shown on his original invoice. He had assumed the company had changed its billing department. I asked him to send the email and his payment confirmation directly to Naomi. He did so before we ended the call. The other customers followed. Each had received a notice that looked familiar enough to avoid suspicion. Each notice used information taken from the blue tied ledger, the correct order number, the unpaid amount, the delivery date, and the name of the person responsible for payment all appeared in the message. That accuracy had made the deception work. By early afternoon, Naomi had a statement from every affected customer. The bank kept the remaining funds frozen. The property lender agreed to review the payment applied to Derek Loan after Naomi sent proof that the money came from a customer contract belonging to another company. No one promised an immediate return. The process would take records, signatures, and cooperation. Still, the money could no longer move without attention. Derek stood in the office doorway while Naomi explained the next steps. He said Claire had approved the customer notices. He said she had access to the ledger and knew which balances were available. He said he had relied on her authority as a Mercer family member. Claire turned toward him slowly. She reminded him that he had created the new company, chosen the warehouse, entered the Paul Vetter payment, and scheduled the machine pickup. Derek said none of that would have happened if she had not assured him that I would sign. Claire said he had told her the money would remain untouched until the new company secured financing. He said the property payment had been necessary to prevent default. She asked why he had not told her before using it. He said she already knew the houses were in trouble. Their plan had depended on them speaking as one person. Once the records separated their actions, they began separating themselves from each other. Derek blamed Claire initials. Claire blamed Derek debt. Neither one spoke about the employees who had built the orders or the customers who had trusted our name. Naomi asked both of them to leave the office computer and company phones on the desk. Derek refused. I told him the phone had been purchased by Mercer Woodworks and the account was paid from our operating account. He placed it on the desk. Claire removed her office key and alarm card from her ring. She set them beside the blue-tied ledger. Then she asked to speak with me alone. We walked into the finishing room. The smell of varnish still hung near the drying racks, though no one had opened a can that morning. Claire said the town did not need to know what had happened. She said customers could be told there had been a billing error. She said the crew could be told the expansion had been postponed. I asked whether she wanted the truth hidden to protect the business or to protect her. She said both were the same now. I told her they were not. The business needed accurate invoices, restored payments, protected machines, and employees who knew who had authority. She needed people to believe she had made an administrative mistake. She said public shame would not return the money. I told her silence would not return trust. Claire looked through the window toward the work floor. Owen was helping 2 younger men secure the router service panel after our second set of photographs. She said Owen had wanted her gone for years. I told her Owen had risked his job to show me the duplicate tags. She said he would benefit from her removal. I told her that did not make the evidence false. She asked whether I planned to call the police. I said I had not decided what formal action would be necessary. First, we would protect payroll, complete current contracts, document every transaction, and contact the customers. Naomi would tell me which financial reports had to be corrected. The bank would decide what it required. Claire said Derek would lose everything if the property lender demanded immediate payment. I told her that possibility had existed before he used customer money. He had simply moved the risk onto people who had never agreed to carry it. When we returned to the office, Derek was gone. The company phone remained on the desk, but a drawer under the printer stood open. Naomi said a folder had been removed. Owen entered carrying a stack of pages he had found beside the loading door. Derek had dropped them while leaving through the back lot. The first page listed the machines planned for transfer. The second listed active customers and their expected balances. The third page contained employee names divided into two columns. One column was marked Retain. The other was marked Release after transition. Most of the younger workers were in the first column. The men with the longest service, the highest wages, and the strongest connection to the old workshop system were in the second. Owen Pike name stood at the top. Claire waited until the crew had gone home before returning to the workshop. She came through the front door without her office key and stood near the drafting table. The blue-tied ledger remained where she had left it beside the company phone. I was reviewing the employee list with Owen and Naomi. Owen closed the folder when Claire entered. Naomi gathered the bank records and said she would finish the reconciliation from her office. Claire asked Owen to stay. She said he deserved to hear what she had believed. Owen remained beside the finishing table. Claire looked at the release column and said Derek had created the list after comparing wages, insurance costs, and production speed. She had objected to several names. She had not objected to his. Owen asked why. She said because Walter listened to him. She spoke about years of production meetings where I asked Owen which jobs the crew could finish and then asked Claire how soon the invoices could go out. She said one question carried authority and the other carried expectation. Owen told her he had never wanted the office. Claire said that was not the point. He did not need to want it. He had the kind of trust she had spent years trying to earn. I told her trust was not a fixed amount divided between two people. She said it felt fixed when every disagreement ended with me asking Owen what he thought. I remembered those meetings. Claire would propose a delivery date. Owen would explain what the wood, hardware, or finishing schedule allowed. I had treated his answer as practical and hers as ambitious. I had not meant to reduce her work, meaning did not erase the pattern she had lived with. Claire said Derek noticed it before anyone else. He told her I would never retire while Owen remained in the building. He said the workshop would pass to the person who controlled production, while she would remain the daughter who handled paperwork. She believed him because part of it matched her own fear. Derek did not begin by asking her to take money. He began by asking her to imagine a company where she made the decisions. He showed her showroom designs, builder forecasts, and a map of new housing developments between Dayton and Columbus. He said Mercer Home Interiors could bring in contracts while my workshop became the production arm. He told her I would accept the structure once I saw the revenue. Claire said she formed the new company because she wanted something that carried her authority from the beginning. Then the houses on Maple Ridge Road stopped selling. Derek had borrowed more than she knew. The lender threatened default. The warehouse deposit was due. The builder contract remained only a proposal. He told her they needed one customer payment to keep the plan alive. She approved the notice for Paul Vetter because Derek promised the money would remain in the new account until financing closed. When he used it for his property loan, she knew the plan had changed. She did not stop it. She told herself the next contracts would replace the money before anyone noticed. Then, another customer payment arrived. Then, another. Each payment made it harder to return to me without admitting what she had already approved. I asked when she first understood that Mercer Woodworks might fail under their production agreement. Claire looked toward the storage bay. She said she understood when Derek reduced the workshop fee for the second time. He said the new company needed stronger margins for the lender. He promised the fee would rise after the first year. Claire calculated wages and lumber costs herself. She knew the workshop could not survive 12 months at that amount. She approved the papers anyway because the purchase offer would come before then. The redirected customer payments were supposed to become the down payment. The machine transfer would give Mercer Home Interiors enough collateral to secure financing. Once the customers, machines, and name were under the new company, I would be left with a building, payroll, and unfinished obligations. Selling would appear to be the only reasonable choice. Claire said she believed I would accept the monthly payment rather than close the workshop. I asked whether she had considered the crew. She looked at Owen. She said Derek planned to hire back the younger workers under new contracts. The older men cost more and questioned him too often. Owen asked whether she had agreed. Claire said she had not signed the list. He told her she had approved the structure that made the list useful. She lowered her eyes. Owen opened the folder again and placed the duplicate brass tag beside her hand. He said June had trained him to protect the order system because one wrong number could make a customer pay for another family project. Claire touched the edge of the tag. She said her mother trusted him too. Owen said June trusted Claire with payroll when a missed tax deposit could have closed the business faster than any bad cut of wood. Claire looked at me. She asked whether I had truly planned to divide leadership between her and Owen. I opened the lower drawer of my drafting table and removed a plain folder. It contained a plan I had written 18 months earlier. There was no secret contract and no legal surprise. It was a working proposal with notes from Naomi and Owen. Claire would lead administration, customer development, pricing review, and scheduling. Owen would lead production, training, equipment care, and quality control. Naomi would prepare separate monthly reports so neither side could hide costs or move money without the other seeing it. I would reduce my hours over 2 years and retain final authority only for major debt, sale of equipment, and use of the Mercer name. At the end of that period, Claire would receive the first option to purchase my ownership interest. Owen would receive a long-term profit share tied to production performance and employee training. Claire read every page. She stopped at the section bearing her name. I had written that the company needed her understanding of customers, cash flow, and deadlines. I had also written that she sometimes treated questions as challenges to her value. Before any transition, she needed to show that authority could be shared without becoming a contest. She closed the folder. She said I had judged her without telling her. I said I had delayed a conversation that should have happened earlier. That was my failure. Her choices were still hers. She asked why Owen had seen the plan before she had. Owen said he had seen only the production section. He had told me he would not accept leadership unless Claire had equal authority in the office. Claire looked at him as though she had heard a language she had forgotten. I told her Derek had built his plan around the belief that Owen wanted her place. The evidence showed the opposite. Owen had protected her role before she tried to remove his. Claire sat in the chair beside the drafting table. She asked what would happen to Mercer Home Interiors. Naomi would document the transfers. The bank would hold the remaining funds. Customers would confirm where their payments belonged. Derek would have no access to our records, machines, name, or staff. Any agreement about repayment would depend on complete disclosure. Claire asked what would happen to her. I told her she would resign from every position at Mercer Woodworks and sign a statement identifying the notices, payments, and equipment actions she had approved. She would have no access to the workshop or customer accounts. She nodded once. Then she asked whether she was still my daughter. That was the question no ledger could answer. I told her being my daughter did not restore authority. She said that was not what she had asked. I looked at the blue-tied ledger, the employee list, and the folder containing the future I had failed to discuss. I told her I had not decided what remained between us outside the workshop. Claire stood and placed the succession plan beside the ledger. She said she would sign the business records in the morning. Then she left through the front door. Owen waited until her car had crossed the old rail line. He asked whether I wanted him to lock the door. I said yes. For the first time since Claire was a child, I listened to the bolt slide into place and did not know whether I was protecting the business from her or protecting what was left of my family from the business. Claire returned the next morning with Naomi. She carried no coffee, only no office bag, and no keys. Derek did not come with her. Naomi placed 4 documents on the finishing table. The first was a resignation from every position Claire held at Mercer Woodworks. The second listed each customer notice she had approved. The third identified the equipment transfer papers, the altered access records, and the payment instructions connected to Mercer Home Interiors. The fourth document required Claire and Derek to cooperate with the bank, the customers, and the property lender until every disputed payment had been traced. Claire read each page before signing. She did not ask me to soften the language. The bank returned the 3 customer payments that still remained in the new company account after the customers confirmed their original contracts. Paul Vetter provided his email notice, payment receipt, and invoice. His lender began reviewing the transfer Derek had used for the house on Maple Ridge Road. Naomi warned me that the money already spent might take months to recover. I told her I understood. Mercer Woodwork still had enough cash to cover payroll after the returned funds arrived. We delayed 2 lumber orders, sold a delivery van we rarely used, and arranged new payment dates with our largest supplier. No one pretended the damage had disappeared. It had simply become manageable. Derek signed a repayment agreement 3 weeks later. His share of the warehouse deposit was surrendered first. The design software and office equipment bought through Mercer Home Interiors were sold. The proceeds went toward the missing customer funds. The property lender required him to sell one of the unfinished houses. He blamed the workshop, the bank, and the market. He never blamed the decision to use money that belonged to someone else. Claire moved out of the house she shared with him before the sale was complete. She did not tell me whether the separation would become permanent. I did not ask. That belonged to her life. The workshop belonged to mine. We sent corrected invoices to every customer. The notice explained that Mercer Woodworks had not changed its banking information and that future payment instructions would require confirmation from 2 authorized people. I called each customer myself. Some were angry. Most were embarrassed that the false notices had looked so ordinary. Harold Benson said the small difference in the company name had bothered his daughter. Paul Vetter said he had trusted the Mercer name because I had delivered every job he had ever ordered. That trust was the part no repayment agreement could restore by itself. We finished his reception counters without charging him for the delay. Owen supervised the final installation. When the truck returned, Paul handed him a copy of the corrected receipt and asked him to bring it directly to me. The crew remained. Not one employee lost a job because of the plan Claire and Derek had made. Owen did not become owner of the company. He became production director under a written agreement that described his authority and his limits. Naomi prepared monthly reports that both of us reviewed. No customer account could be changed by one person. No machine could be pledged, moved, or valued for another company without written approval from the owner and outside confirmation. I reduced my schedule to 4 days a week. That was not retirement. It was the first honest step toward it. Claire stayed away from the workshop. For 2 months, she contacted me only through Naomi when a record needed explanation. Her messages were brief and complete. She did not defend Derek. She did not ask to return. On the first Sunday in October, she called my home. She said she had found one of June's old recipe cards inside a kitchen drawer. She asked whether I wanted it. I told her to bring it by. She stood on the porch while I made coffee. We spoke about her mother, the weather, and the empty house on Maple Ridge Road. We did not speak about the business until Claire said she understood why the workshop door remained closed to her. I told her understanding the boundary did not erase the reason for it. She said she knew. She asked whether there might be a time when she could visit as my daughter. I told her the workshop was not the place to begin. We sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes. When she left, she took her cup to the sink without being asked. It was a small thing. I did not turn it into forgiveness. The following Monday, I went to Derek's former office. The blue-tied ledger still rested beside the company phone. The copied pages were gone. Naomi had stored them with the transaction records. I carried the ledger across the workshop. The crew had already started the morning machines. The wide belt sander ran along the back wall. The computer-controlled router moved through a sheet of maple. Neither machine had left the building. I placed the ledger in the locked drawer beneath my drafting table. Then I opened it again. Keeping it hidden would have repeated the same mistake in another form. Owen and I installed a scanner on the table beside it. Every new order would be written in the ledger, entered into the accounting system, and matched to a brass tag. The record would no longer depend on one locked drawer or one person in memory. The first new order came from a family restoring a farmhouse outside Mechanicsburg. I wrote the customer name, deposit, lumber species, and delivery date on a clean page. Owen stamped the order number into a new brass tag. He tied it to a stack of walnut near the north wall. The tag carried only one company name, Mercer Woodworks. I returned to the drafting table and looked at the open ledger. The blue cloth rested beside the new scanner, no longer guarding a secret and no longer being used to take one. Outside, a freight train crossed the old rail line. Inside, the new brass tag turned once on its wire and settled against the walnut.